And actually, I feel pretty lucky, we feel pretty lucky at Testify, because Ross is a third tour Austinite. So I'm really glad he stopped to do our show this time around. He's also a devoted hugger of trees. Give it up for the trees. But notably, he's written a book that's on the Amazon top 90,000 bestseller list. All it takes is one word to make a book. Make a book a dream. So please welcome Ross to the stage. I'm super excited. Welcome him with a huge round of applause to the Testify stage. And he's going to tell us a story about J.T. Brown, a.k.a. Count Dracula.
It was around the 1-year anniversary of my graduation from college when I found myself jobless and still aimless, kicked out of my father's place, and forced to move into an apartment with a female friend of a friend whom I barely knew because neither of us could afford to live by ourselves. And we moved to a particularly sketchy part of Houston where assaults, we would receive almost daily notices at our doorstep of some assaults or some break-in that occurred on the premises. My car got broken into, the shower backed up occasionally and flooded the bathroom floor and sometimes seeped into the bedroom. So I didn't have a whole lot going for me at this time. It was around this time and under these circumstances that I applied to work as a part-time telemarketer for a nonprofit theater in Houston called the Alley Theater. And salesmanship does not come naturally to me. But I looked at this as a challenge, a way to toughen my skin, to get out of my comfort zone, and it was for a good cause. But let's face it, the job sucked. As if cold calling people and asking for their credit card information for 4 hours stretches at a time wasn't unpleasant enough. It paid $7 an hour and no commission. The office where we worked was in an equally sketchy part of town on the far other outskirts of Houston from where I lived. And the room itself was fairly nondescript. It was smaller than this room and no windows, plenty of fluorescent light. And our workstations lined the perimeter of the room. There wasn't much privacy. So you might be asking yourself, aside from liberal arts, studio art major grads, what other desperate saps are drawn to this dream job? Well, there was Rick, who was in his 40s. He was a crack abuser on disability because he had AIDS. Every sentence he said dripped of sexual innuendo. He's also the only person on record to sexually harass me. He was gay, I was and still am not, so there's no real future for us. Then there was Greg, who was in his 30s, lived with his mother, and had a habit of carrying on conversations with himself into the phone. While on the clock. And it would also double as a head rest for the occasional power nap. Not even Greg was surprised when he was terminated. There was also Toby, who was in his mid-30s, jovial, affable fellow, who also this was a reformed skinhead, who in his own words used to beat homosexuals and minorities within an inch of their lives. To his credit, he had done a 180, turned his life around, and settled down as a suburban family man in, again, this is up in Houston area. Although at this time his marriage was on the verge of collapse. Yet despite steep competition among this motley crew of oddities, the most colorful by far was a nerdy-looking, self-absorbed oaf named JT. JT was medium height, short to medium height, had a bit of a belly, had long, he was 40, just turned 40, had long unwashed dark hair, a ratty goatee, thick Coke bottle glasses, wore the same black shirt and black jeans to work every day. And he was drawn to all things goth, sci-fi, fantasy, so think Batman, Anne Rice, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Blade, that sort of thing. He was also drawn to porn. We know this. We know this because he was busted surfing adult sites using the lone office computer. His diet consisted mostly of canned sardines. People like myself felt sorry for him and brought food to work to give to him. He never thanked us, but the point here is that not all telemarketers are bad. He also circled like a vulture around people, coworkers, those coworkers who brought in their lunch or dinner when they were on break, just hoping to get in on the action. Table scraps, yum! So he was, this is all to say he was a human vampire, which is a particularly apt depiction because he believed with all conviction, there's no doubt in his mind, that he was the present day embodiment of Vlad Tepes Knight, a.k.a. Vlad the Impaler, a.k.a. Count Dracula. No doubt in his mind. He spent his nights writing his memoirs, which is a hefty undertaking when he'd been alive for 5 centuries. And there was no doubt in his mind a major publisher would pick it up. He briefly had a website that had a sample of his work. Shakespeare, he wasn't. Unfortunately, it's no longer up, but I archived it in case anyone would like to see it. He also successfully cultivated a harem of susceptible young women who participated in this occult sexual deviancy that involved DIY blood transfusions. Don't worry, I won't go into any more detail. But either this was the person that Bram Stoker based his written work on, or this was the most delusional person in the history of history. And this was before self-delusion went mainstream. Lucky me, JT was assigned to sit next to me at the office, where his poor hygiene and poor diction were on full display. He freely passed gas and belched, this on top of his BO du jour. Yet despite his poor grasp of the English language, he was actually pretty good at his job, suckering people out of their hard-earned money. So some parallels with his personal life. He didn't have a car, and I took pity on him and gave him rides occasionally. He was on the way, more or less. And on one occasion, and I'm not exaggerating, my car smelled like vomit during the entire commute. And we had also exchanged contact information, which will come in handy right now, because one night I got a call, and it was from JT, and his latest female conquest had grown tired of his act and kicked him out of the street. Our office manager was kind enough to go retrieve him and all of his belongings, but refrained from indulging his request to stay with them overnight. That was his first resort. I was his second and presumably last resort. And so knowing here we have a virtual stranger. We worked together, 4 or 5 weeks. Didn't know him that well, but knew enough to conclude that this was one creepy dude. So naturally, I agreed. You might ask yourself, why? Well, despite his eccentricities, he was mostly harmless. I was young, naive, took pity on him, trying to be the good Samaritan. I had nothing going on in my life anyway. And plus, there's an expression that a bad experience sometimes makes for a good story. So I guess you'll be the judge. I'm not done yet. So we took him, met them where they were, loaded up my used Honda Accord, filled to the brim with all of his junk, made it back to my apartment. Fortunately, my roommate was out of town that evening, but she was coming back the next day. So parked him on her couch, and reality started setting in, because the very next day was New Year's Eve, when a lot of businesses are closed. I should mention, he had identified permanent lodging, but was unable to move in until the day after, New Year's Eve. Now, given that businesses tend to be closed New Year's Eve, and it generally takes a long time to find permanent lodging, the fear factor kicked in that JT might be my problem for another day and another night ad infinitum. So I went to bed that night wishing that my door had a lock. I woke up the next day fortunate to find that I did not have any teeth marks on my neck, and found him on the couch where I left him watching cable access TV. So I guess he was nocturnal. I took him over to this place that he intended to move into, and it looked like a converted roach motel. And my concerns about background checks and paperwork and clearing deposits, that sort of thing, not an issue. JT was approved immediately. So we started unloading his items into, we went and saw the unit first, opened the door, and the place was a total shithole. There were cigarette burns on the kitchen counter. The carpet had stains from God knows what. There was a fist-sized hole in a closet door in the main living area. JT takes one step in there, looks around and goes, "Whoa, this place is great!" I unload the rest of his items, relieved. I barely make out a thank you from him as we depart. No hearty handshake, no offer to buy me lunch. I was used and losed. I stopped giving him rides after that, and doing other favors for him. 4 years and 3 jobs later, I was in a much better place, had a stable job, and was able to afford to live by myself. I got a call one Sunday, went to voicemail. I checked it, and it was none other than Vlad the Ingrate. And his voicemail went something like this. Hey Ross, it's been a long time. I could really use your help. Call me back at this number. I don't have much time. I didn't call him back. At this point, I'd learned how to establish boundaries. But I had a feeling it was just a matter of time before he found his next victim. After all, he had been at this for hundreds of years.